Hello and welcome to Chapter 3 of the Entrepreneurship Textbook, 3rd edition, Facilitating Social Entrepreneurship. In this chapter, we're looking at the way that social entrepreneurship is also a part of the entrepreneurship world. At times, people believe that entrepreneurship is all about making money, which of course it is. It's when you talk about entrepreneurship, you're in the business of making money, making a profit. But at the same time, there are people who look at other ways of making money by doing things for the community, valuable things for the community. Like their sole enterprise is looking at ways how to enhance the community. So the purpose of social entrepreneurship is to identify any pressing social and environmental issues in society and how to create sustainable solutions for a long-term impact, right? So that could be something that's, clean air, clean water, recycles material, or it could be like, I want to enhance the education of a certain community. So again, they're both hand in hand, right? You look at traditional entrepreneurship, which is to make a profit, while social entrepreneurship is to tackle social problems and bring about a social change to it. And so you look at what the social innovation means and how does that impact society. We look at social innovation is basically a novel solution to a social problem that's more effective and efficient. So how do you create value in society to impact society as a whole, not just for individuals, right? And of course, gaining popularity amongst the people, and of course, gaining popularity amongst to create a social value. And of course, looking at the 5 elements of social innovation, which includes there has to be a social need, right? There needs to be a need for it in society. Innovation development, something new and novel. How are you going to implement that? What improvements do you need to do in order to see things happen? And of course, the relationship and collaboration between stakeholders. Social value is generated when the solution can be turned into an organization used inside. And of course, what constitutes social value is not very clear. But of course, we look at, what is experienced and how, of course, it can make an impact. Wicked problems, looking at it as to, of course, any larger complex social problems with no clear solution. Wicked problems, for example, could be homelessness, right? There are tons of organizations out there in the United States and in the world who are tackling homelessness. But that's an ongoing issue that is going to be continuing on for many, many, many years. There's different factors that play into place. And that's something that's not going to be taken care of overnight. Healthcare is another one. Poverty, climate change, right? Those are wicked problems that you kind of really don't see a clear indication that it's ever going to be over. But of course, there's nothing wrong with tackling that kind of things. The nature of wicked problems come from significant challenges. Are there ways to solve it? Yes, but it's going to take a significant amount of effort from numerous stakeholder powers and a lot of money to do so. The UN Sustainability Development Goals, right? Of course, there are some goals here. 17 goals serve as a blueprint for achieving that by 2030. Consider universal and address major issues such as climate change, chronic health conditions, and aging population. And so again, if you wanted to look at a way to, if you were looking at launching a social venture, I would definitely encourage you to check out the UN Sustainability Development Goals online to see how ways that you can perhaps establish a social venture around these development goals. A for-profit social ventures is basically a business that has a dual mission, right? It has a mission of achieving both social and environmental objectives, and of course financially sustaining itself. There are organizations out there that of course want to do better for society, right? They want to whether it's climate change, whether it's education, but of course they need to sustain themselves, right? They're looking to make money as well, to sustain itself. Of course, the for-profit social ventures, they generating economic value while also providing that shared value in terms of society. Another one is looking at benefit corporation, which is a subcategory of a social profit venture, a for-profit social venture. It's basically, it's an organization certified by a nonprofit B Lab that ensures that strict standards of social environmental performance, accountability, and transparency are met. Enterprising nonprofits act more like a for-profit venture, but operate with the mission to address social and environmental challenges. So, you have that. You have enterprising nonprofits that, yes, they are out there to make society a better place, or to tackle issues that are going on, such as climate change and homelessness, but they also think about making a profit as well. And of course, they incorporate earned income activities, of course, selling products or services that is used as revenue generation. And of course, you have market-based approaches, right? How do I make money? Because the reason why nonprofits are starting to look at this as an enterprise is because they can't always rely on grants or government support to address these initiatives, so they need to go on their own and do it to make money. Of course, all nonprofits must reinvest their profits back into the venture, but not every nonprofit is an enterprise nonprofit. So, of course, a typical nonprofit is not in the business of making revenue, right? They're in the business of reinvesting whatever they make, should they make any money, back into the nonprofit. But of course, again, enterprise nonprofits want to make money as well. There are 4 models of revenue generation, and even if you're not going to start a nonprofit or some form of a social venture, you can still kind of use these revenue generating models for yourself, for your business model. You have the first one, which is the customer model, right? So you sell a product or a service to a specific target group, right? Whether that's shoes, books, content, material, whatever it is, to the specific target market. The employee model is basically revenue generated by the type of person hired. So in other words, if I hire you, you're creating a product or service, and of course you get paid through doing that. Perhaps, let's say, for example, let's look at independent contractors that are work for an organization. They're out there doing the work, they're doing their service, and of course that is one way for an organization to get paid as well. And of course you have the product model, monetize a product or service, and of course for social impact, and of course you have a combined model, which you just combine any of these 2 models that I just mentioned with customer, employee model, or product model. There is, of course, the hybrid social venture, which is an organization engages in revenue generating activities while also having a philanthropical strategy to help deliver social ventures. One good example is Tom Shoes. They are in the business of making money for the company, but at the same time, they give a pair or so to each time you buy one. So, that would be a really great example of a hybrid social venture. There is, of course, social venture capital, right? There is, if you're looking for VC money, there is things out there for it. Basically, social venture capital is a form of investment funding that focuses on social ventures. And of course, the investment is based on how have you achieved to make a positive social, environmental, and a financial return. So even though a social venture capital is not the same thing as a typical VC fund, where VC fund is just giving money to a company so they can generate as much revenue as they can in a short amount of time span, a social venture capital is giving money to an organization with 2 things in mind: making sure that it's actually making an impact or social environmental impact, but also returning its money. Venture philanthropy is a type of impact investment where investors support social ventures by applying sort of the same things as venture capital funding. Of course, investors typically have a high level of engagement and involvement in the business. The main goal here is to make a social impact. Venture philanthropists share experiencing with nonprofit entrepreneurs to help grow and scale their company, emphasize funding social causes, and of course, they want to make the nonprofits scale and make a larger impact. When it comes to social ventures, they have stakeholders, the people. There are still stakeholders. What is at stake, and of course, how are you creating value for each stakeholder? There are different types of stakeholders, right? The three primary attributes of power, legitimacy, and urgency. The dormant stakeholder, right? These are the the sleepers, quote unquote. They hold power but don't tend to use it unless it's given, unless they absolutely have to. The discretionary stakeholder, that is someone with no power to influence and no urgent claims to have the legitimacy. Then you have the demanding stakeholders, which possess urgency but no power or legitimacy, and may be the only dissenting opinion in the room. Then, of course, you have your dominant stakeholders. They both have the power and legitimacy and have strong influence. You have the dependent stakeholders who have both urgency and legitimacy but lack the power. The dangerous ones, they both have the power and urgency but use the power to coerce or even resort to violence. Usually, hopefully, it doesn't happen, of course. And then the definitive stakeholders, only ones who possess all three attributes, significant role, and claims must be given priority. Then, of course, you have social impact measure. How do you measure the impact of what you're doing is one thing that can be tricky for social ventures, because in a typical for-profit enterprise where there's venture capital, you can measure your metrics as to how you're making an impact in society, like how many how many things are you actually selling? Are you meeting your quarterly goals when you're looking at a venture capital? And of course, in this case, when the social venture, you're measuring to see how much social change has been attributed by the direct activity done by this particular organization. Theory of change is a plan that explains how and why a set of specific change initiatives is expected to lead to certain outcomes. Of course, they're going to see how and why the development program will work before it begins. And of course, looking at an example is the Rockefeller Foundation's toolkit on how to deliver great results and impact. What is the problem you're trying to solve? What is your key audience? What is your entry point of reaching your key audience? What steps are needed to bring about change? What is measurable? What are some of the wider benefits? And what is the long-term change that you see as your goal? Right? Asking specific questions can, of course, lead to unparalleled and surprising outcomes. How do you, calculating social return on investments is basically a method of measuring the value of social, economic, environmental factors created by the company, calculated by estimating the social and venture value by dividing up the financial cost of the project and an initiative. And so that's how you go about that. Social entrepreneurs can use it to share the value of the program to a designated target market. So, and that is chapter 3 of the social entrepreneurship. Chapter 3, the social entrepreneurship from the Entrepreneurship textbook, 3rd edition. Thank you.